Can Chelsea really afford to keep all of these players? Are Arsenal shopping in the right window? And is Messi heading back to Barcelona? Is he really? I'm Matt Froelich here from FourFourTwo, and here's what's on our feed. Okay, first up, and we've got some transfer news from Chelsea, because where else would transfer news be coming from in the Premier League? The team that won't stop spending and have such a ridiculously inflated squad. I've no idea what they're supposed to do with it. Anyway, João Pedro is the latest name to be not linked with the club, to be signing on the dotted line. And it now takes Chelsea's spending from Brighton up to £282 million if you include the money they paid for Graham Potter a few years ago. This is absolutely insane. You've got João Pedro, you've got 𝗕𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗏, you've got Robert Sanchez, Moises Caicedo, of course, how could you forget, and a few other backroom staff that have gone along with it. That is an insane amount of money, but who is getting the better deal out of it? Well, basically, I've thought about this, and there's two sides to both arguments. Let's start with Chelsea. Firstly, they're getting very good players. Yeah, Sanchez aside, they are getting some very, very good players. 𝗕𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗏, I think, has been good. He's definitely come into his own at Chelsea. Caicedo is one of, if not, the best defensive midfielders in the Premier League. I've said it, there's going to be a lot of arguments, but I really think he is. He costs a stupid amount of money, but he's very, very good. On top of this, they basically don't have to do any scouting. I know that sounds so mad, but if you know that there's a team who go out there, go to all corners of the world, and are able to source really, really good players. And of course, there are a few players at Brighton who aren't very good when they come in, but their strike rate is unbelievable. Then you might as well go and buy those players. Chelsea could have bought Caicedo from anyone else, but it would be a bit of a gamble. Once they know how good he is, yes, you have to pay over the odds, but they also know what they're getting, if that makes sense. I mean, look, Chelsea, by their own recognition, haven't exactly had the let's say the best of scouting reports over the past 10 years or so. Off the top of my head, the likes of Lucas Piazon and Marco van Ginkel, both of them were supposed to be the next big thing. Chelsea bought them in at a young age, and they didn't really go anywhere for one reason or another, probably due to the high turnover of players. But you can see that Chelsea are really interested in youth, tying their players down to long-term contracts, so buying from Brighton kind of makes sense. I mean, the real thing to do would be go to Brighton and buy their whole scouting department, but there you go. On the flip side of this, like I did mention, it's costing Chelsea a lot of money. Yes, they could go and get Moises Caicedo for a couple of million, and then they paid 115 million. They could have got João Pedro for less, and now they're paying 60 million. From Brighton's perspective, though, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. So actually, someone has replied to this tweet with basically a good summary of what I'm thinking. This looks brilliant from a pure business perspective, but not from a football perspective. I understand Brighton ain't that big. That's a bit harsh. And nowhere near winning a trophy. He said, but if you are celebrating selling your best players, then it's seriously wrong. And to be honest, I kind of agree with it. I understand that these players want to leave for a bigger pay packet, for playing at a higher level for Champions League football. But on the flip side of it, are Brighton ever really going to be challenging for anything higher than 8th they finished last season? Maybe 6th? If they keep selling their best players, not only selling their best players, but selling the best players to the teams that are directly above them in the table? At what point do Brighton try and keep hold of one or two of these and really build a team that's going to be capable of breaking into the top 6? But yeah, as for Chelsea, everything's a bit mad because they keep on signing players. Right, so I've got it written down here. Pedro Neto, Delap, Cole Palmer, Sterling, Madueke, Jackson, Nkunku, Mudryk. Ban pending. Now João Pedro and Bruno Gittins, plus a couple of youngsters on the edge of the squad, including Mark Guiu, who might be on his way to Ipswich by the time this video comes out. 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏, I think that's how you pronounce it. Tyreek George as well. Oh my God, and João Felix, who's definitely leaving the club, so kind of leave his name off the list. There are so many players who have not only just joined, like I said, so probably slightly reluctant to leave on a permanent basis, but also on huge contracts for such a long period of time. I don't know how Chelsea are going to fit them in. It's just, I just can't see it being sustainable, but hey, there you go. Chelsea want to spend their money, and like we mentioned, Brighton are more than happy to accept it. Moving on to another club in Crystal Palace, who I feel like are in a little bit of a similar position to Brighton, where they cannot necessarily offer players an extended period of success, namely Eberechi. Now, he is the man who every single team is looking at. Certainly the bigger teams are looking at him thinking, you know what, we could do with a player like that. And two of the biggest ones are Arsenal and Spurs. And it looks like Arsenal are the ones who have made some serious contact with his representatives. That's according to, well, you've seen the news everywhere. Fabrizio Romano's been tweeting about it. There's been a nice little repost on 433 as well, saying that initial talks have taken place over the weekend. And my question here for Arsenal fans is this the shop window that you're supposed to be looking in? Is left winger the answer to all of your problems? There were plenty of people underneath our previous video saying that it wasn't necessarily the finishing of chances, it was the creation of chances from the left wing that were really letting Arsenal down, because Martinelli and Trossard aren't consistent enough, whether it's staying fit or just playing to a really high level. And it actually kind of makes sense. Bukayo Saka on the right-hand side is so good that when teams manage to mark him out of the game, whether a left-back has a good game, like Nuno Mendes, or whether they double or triple up on him and he can't quite have the same impact that he normally has, there isn't really anything else. When I think of Martin Odegaard dominating games, running games, it always seems to be in conjunction with Saka. Never really kind of the whole Odegaard-Martinelli link-up. It's not as strong on the other side. So actually, Eze seems like a very, very good idea. On the left wing, very creative, can help to create not only a higher amount of chances, but also a higher quality of chances, that then, once they add a striker into the squad, Arsenal will probably be flying. In fact, I think they'll have a fairly good shot of sustaining a better title challenge if not only they've got a striker to finish it, which is the obvious answer, but also if they've got a left winger who's creating more chances. Like I said, the reason that I think Eze will leave Crystal Palace is not only because he's playing at a higher level, they can't guarantee his success, he gets to play in the Champions League, and let's face it, he gets a bigger wage packet. On top of this, there is a major issue that could affect Palace's spot in the Europa League next season. I'm sure you've seen murmurings of this, but nobody can own the majority of shares in two clubs in the same competition. In this case, it is Crystal Palace and Lyon. Jon Textor is the name of the American businessman who owns the majority shares in Palace and Lyon. So falls foul of this rule. Both of them qualified for the Europa League. So because of this, he sold his stake in Palace, but he sold it recently, which is after the deadline that UEFA set for next season's competition. I believe it was back in March the 1st, where you had to have not been part of two clubs. Obviously, back then, he'd have had no idea that Crystal Palace were going to end up in the Europa League, but they did through winning the FA Cup. And lastly, you've got Lyon's appeal against being relegated to the second French division. But the reason it affects Crystal Palace is because Lyon finished 6th in their division. Crystal Palace finished 10th, which means that Lyon would get the spot. So, it all depends on whether or not Lyon are relegated to the second division in France. If they are, Palace get the spot. If not, and their UEFA say that, unfortunately, the shares haven't been sold in time, Crystal Palace will not be in European competition. And that would mean that Nottingham Forest go from the Conference League up to the Europa League, and Brighton, who we talked about not being in European football, will actually go into the Conference League because they finished 8th, so then technically would move up one spot. Next up, and this is less news, more just funny, and it's Fluminense's Twitter account, who, after beating Inter Milan 2-0, by the way, and being the only Brazilian side to make it through to the quarterfinals of the Club World Cup, they have tweeted not only Botafogo, but also Flamengo as well, saying, how's the weather in Rio? It's the kind of shithousery I like to see. I'm all for it. You just know that some social media admin has sat behind his computer and gone, this is going to be funny. I'm going to put this out there and cause an absolute storm, and it's brilliant. I'm all for it. I know if you're a fan of Botafogo or Flamengo, you're probably going to be really annoyed, but I think it's quite funny. That's some good shithousery. And actually, if you see any more good shithousery online, leave it in the comments below. I'm going to put it in next week's video. Right, some more news. Messi back to Barcelona. Oh, I've done it. I've gone for the clickbait. I've fallen for it. Apparently, according to some journalist who I clicked on his page, is such a huge Messi fan, it'd be kind of weird to be spreading lies about him. Anyway, he said that Messi is waiting for a short-term offer and is going to weigh up a move back to Europe, potentially Barcelona, before the World Cup, because the end of the MLS season is later on this year, and that's when his deal expires with Inter Miami. And yeah, he's going to head maybe to Barcelona for 6 months to stay match fit and at the top level of European football before heading to the World Cup. Firstly, this confirms he's going to be at the World Cup with Argentina. One more final Messi-Ronaldo showdown. It felt like the last World Cup was the last one, but here we are. Do I believe this? No. I believed it for about 10 seconds. And then I definitely didn't believe it when Inter Miami came out and they clarified this with a club statement that said Messi is under contract until the end of 2025. The reality is that both parties are interested in continuing this relationship. The necessary steps are being taken. He'll probably get an extended deal. All eyes of the footballing world are on North America. That includes Canada, Mexico, and the US for the World Cup next summer. Messi is the poster boy of the team, the poster boy of the league. He is just the poster boy of all sponsorship and all advertisers heading into next year's World Cup. It's just such an obvious one that he'll stay in the US. I actually think he'll stay, complete the World Cup, complete the season, and then retire at the end of next season. That's just my own little take on it. I can't see him leaving. Right though, a few more bits before we are done. The first is Jhon Duran. I was amazed when he left Aston Villa and went to 𝗕𝗓𝙍𝗀, actually partnered up with Cristiano Ronaldo in January. I'm even more amazed that he's headed back to Fenerbahce on a 1-year loan. I do get it from his side, but it kind of feels like he's done the footballer's career in reverse. Like, you go throughout your career, you get better and better and better, you have a good career, and then you maybe go to Saudi and take a crazy last payday, and then you're kind of done. He's done it reverse. He's 21 years old. He's got the big payday, and now he's going to go on and have his career in Europe. He's back with Fenerbahce, and I wouldn't rule out him leaving 𝗕𝗓𝙍𝗀 permanently at the end of next season. I mean, it does kind of make sense, because when you rely on a big payday at the end, you're relying on staying fit, staying injury-free, being good enough when you arrive in your mid-30s. And also you sort of relying on Saudi Arabia still pumping money into their football in, he's 21 years old, 10, 15 years time. We all thought when Oscar moved to China that players would be doing that forever. And look where Chinese football is at now. Exactly. So yeah, he's taken the payday first. Apparently he's earned over £8 million in the last 6 months. And now he's back. And now he's back in some European football. Under Jose Mourinho, no less. And that just adds a little bit of drama to the story. Lastly, this has made me laugh all week. And I'm not actually sure it's that funny, but I do think it is. That Steve Bruce is the manager at Blackpool in the lower reaches of English football. Most of you know who Steve Bruce is. His assistant coach is Steve Agnew. His first team coaches are Steve Clements and Steve Dobby, and his goalkeeping coach is Steve Banks. What are the chances of 5 Steves making up some sort of coaching team at Blackpool? This tweet is amazing. Someone called Keith Leith has said it's going to be an ordeal when someone says "Morning Steve" at Blackpool next season. Why are there so many people with the same name? And is this the criteria for the club? I've no idea, but it's brilliant. This is the sort of football nonsense you love to see. Anyway, that's all from me for this week, and that is what's on our feed. Don't forget you can let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. Leave anything crazy you've seen on the internet for next week's episode, but until then, I will see you next time.